So in the last video, we talked a little bit about setting up the grid, and we started to set up that grid. With today, I'm not going to go over too much the granular aspect of setting up the grid, but I want to go over kind of the next steps after that. So we do have this area here is actually a little bit less. So I have it at 4.5, but I believe yours is 4.3. So just kind of, well, you want to set that up based on what you're supposed to have. So I'm just going to make this one the same 4.5, just so the mine are equal. And so in this case, we're going to place a column. And so in the outline, we've given you a couple columns. If you're on a school computer, you won't be able to do the load Autodesk family. But if you're at home, you should be able to. With the load Autodesk family, I like using this quite a bit because it's visual. You can actually see the column types. So if we go down here, we can go to structural columns, and we might have some columns in here. If you're not seeing a column type that kind of lines up with what you want, there actually is different column categories. And so right now, by default, this loads United Kingdom, not US Imperial or Canadian Imperial or whatever. And so what I'll often do is I'll actually just go in here and change this to US Imperial or US Metric. In this case, I'm probably going to go to US Metric. And it will give you a different selection of items based on our location. I mean, obviously there is one for Canada, but I just use the US one because it's a bigger market, obviously, than we are. And so I think it better reflects what we can get access to. So in here, we can go to our HSS. So we have our wide flange, M wide flange column here. And then we also have our HSS. I could also search it. That would be a good idea, but I'm not going to do that. So we have HSS rectangular. I will typically load in HSS rectangular instead of HSS square for the obvious stupid reason of a square is a square. A rectangular can have different sides, but a rectangular can be a square. So I always load the rectangular one, not the square one in. That doesn't really matter a whole lot, but that's just my thing. So MHSS, we'll load that in. And so when we click load here, it's going to ask us what items we want to bring in. We obviously have given you a selection of things. So this is the HSS one. It's going to ask us to select first. And so we've given you 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters, which is obviously 200 centimeters. 20 centimeters. So we want to find something that's 20 centimeters by 20. So we're up to 20 centimeters here by 20 centimeters. And then the wall thickness is our next number. I usually will pick something, so 0.48 of a centimeter. I feel like that's too thick. Wall thickness, I don't know. Just pick one of these. I don't think this part matters too much because we haven't really given you much more specs. So I'm just going to pick that one. So this is 254 by 200. Maybe it won't actually let me do. I might actually have to load in a rectangular or a square one, but you can also change them. Changing them is not necessarily a good idea. And so this we want again the same. I believe it's the same 200 by 200 for the Is this in a different? Is this in meters? I don't know why this would be meters. So we want a W. We probably want a W. It's 200, right? So a W 200. And when we're looking at this, wide flanges are always measured by weight. And so what I would typically do is look at this D number. So our D numbers are depth, and then I believe our BF number is our width. So if you have this, I believe it's the BF number. But if you want to just hedge yourself, you could just grab a few columns. Just grab a bunch and bring them in. And then you can kind of measure them and fix that. So that's how to bring in columns. Same thing with open web joists. So if we go to load Autodesk family, our open web joists and our steel beams would be under structural framing. And those categories are on the left-hand side. If you're just loading in family, not by Autodesk family, those categories over here are basically the folders. So that folder structure will match that. So in here we could bring in W wide flange. I believe we have some wide flange beams between our grids. So I bring in this W wide dash flange one. And then I will bring in the open web joist. So we want a K-series bar joist, and we want it to be bar joist rod web, not angle web. So we'll bring in this rod web one here, and we'll load that in. And again, you can use the control and shift key to bring in multiple. So I think we said 200 millimeters, so we want a 24K. But you could also just grab a whole bunch and bring them all in. And that way you don't have to go back and forth. And then with the wide flange column, I don't really know what we're going to need for a column right now. I'm going to maybe bring in some 310s. Let's maybe bring in some 410s. I just used 310s. And I'm just going to bring in just a few different columns. Or a few different beams, I mean. And we can just change we can find one that matches. So that part's not too important right now, but that will be a good size. And so now all of this stuff is under our structure tab. So if we go into structural column, we have all these different options we brought in. And then if we go here to structural beam, we'll have those options here that we brought in. Make sense?